morning, YouTube. Tired Metalhead Weatherman here. Hopefully, you guys are doing well. Well, last night was pretty eventful. We had a lot of wind reports and a lot of hail reports. Tornadoes did kind of underperform, actually, which was a good thing, if I'm being honest. I was definitely expecting more in the way of activity. There were some big tornadoes in Indiana, but outside of that, we got away pretty scot-free. Haven't heard too much in the way of injuries right now, thankfully. A couple of towns did unfortunately get hit. More updates on that will come in time, I'm sure. But in the meanwhile, though, still lived up to be a pretty big severe weather outbreak. And in a few areas that I wasn't really expecting as much severe weather, got a lot of wind reports, especially even my area. We had a severe thunderstorm complex that moved through. I think we even experienced about 60-mile-per-hour winds here myself. So thankful the power didn't go out during the stream too. But nonetheless, very active, very interesting day for sure. We do have another enhanced risk today, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at that. This is mainly going to be centered around the mid-Atlantic. We're looking at Philly being involved in the enhanced activity. Just to the north and east of Charlotte, Raleigh, we're watching you really close. You are in that slight risk, however, Charlotte, so keep an eye out. Columbia as well, Wilmington. Stretching all the way up the coast here, we have Virginia Beach. We even have further inland towards Virginia, D.C., Baltimore in the enhanced risk. And then we also have Scranton, New York City, Roanoke in that slight risk as well. We also have an additional slight risk that's popped up over here towards the western high plains here. We have Rapid City in South Dakota. We have Valentine, Nebraska. And we even have a little bit of Wyoming here. Thankfully, a lot of this is rural from what I remember when I last went live here. So we could be okay here, but this is an interesting little setup in its own right. A couple other marginal risk areas. This is an area I'm all too familiar with over here towards Texas. This is near Roswell, New Mexico as well. And then, of course, over towards Oklahoma, Texas, pretty much the Arklatex plus Oklahoma. And then even Mississippi, we have a marginal risk. Tornadoes are not the main threat today, thankfully, but we do have to watch this area here, especially over towards southern North Carolina or southeastern North Carolina. I think there is some potential for an upgrade, albeit not a high chance. This is a new setup that's coming in over here towards the western high plains. It also seems like it could ramp up tomorrow. It's still a marginal risk, but we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. We get into the wind threat, and that's pretty much what takes the cake with this enhanced risk. This is a wind-driven enhanced risk. No hatched risk, thankfully, but we could see some significant winds up and down the mid-Atlantic coast here, and further off to the west a little bit inland as well. We also have Rapid City and Valentine here in a 15% wind threat. Of course, we have the 5%ers right here with these marginal risk too. Hail threat is also very palpable over towards western high plains, which is to be expected. Lapse rates here are ridiculous. And then we also have the increased threat for hail with the setup over towards Charlotte and parts of even South Carolina here now, looking at Columbia. So let's go ahead and take a look at things. We'll look at the models real quick and see what we find. Alright, so here we are looking at divergence. This is basically high up in the atmosphere. This is jets cruising altitude at about 40,000 feet just about. When we see a trough develop here, you always want to look for these little jet streaks to be to the left here. And we do see it, although not quite as impressive as I've seen. But nonetheless, though, it is something to keep a close eye on. Jet streak's pretty far back, so that's going to limit severe potential already just off jump. But that's pretty much what we have going on in the highest of levels, or higher levels. We look at the mid to low levels here. It's a little bit more impressive, but it's lacking heavily, and as a result, that's why I'm thinking that the severe setup isn't going to be super duper impressive. Probably going to get some big storms, probably going to get some damaging winds, but as far as tornado threat's concerned, a lot of you guys shouldn't have to worry a lot. There is a little hot spot right here that does develop towards North Carolina and even towards the Virginia state line too, where we get up to about 47 knots here. So that's pretty impressive. But again, I think wind threat becomes the big thing. Not to mention timing of where this low-level jet sets up is going to be key. It seems more and more like the low-level jet may come in a little too late. Depending on what time these storms fire will also determine whether or not I can go live or not, since I have to work today. But looking at some of the instability, it seems like we're sufficient enough. There's a time frame right here. 18Z would be considered lunchtime since we're in Eastern time here. And we do get up to about 2,000 joules per kilogram on mixed CAPE here. So we click this right here and we can see marginal severe storm threat. Again, like I said, kinematically speaking, not an impressive setup, but there does look like there's enough speed shear for damaging winds. The downward CAPE, which is downdraft CAPE, is at about 1239. Usually you want to look at 1,000 as a threshold point. So we surpassed that. Damaging wind definitely seems to be the main threat. It makes sense what the SVC was saying there, but overall conditions are still there. As far as hail is concerned, that's a pretty notable threat here. Lapse rates are in the low to mid sevens. That's measured in Celsius, by the way. But usually, when you start to get into the sevens, especially into the upper sevens, 7.5 and beyond, that's when the hail threat becomes more palpable, and also tornado threat. But we're just at the edge of that threshold here. So we get later into the evening here. CAPE does hold out, especially towards South Carolina, but by overnight and into the early morning, worst of the storm system should be out of here. Next thing we'll go ahead and take a look at is the reflectivity here. Not a whole lot to really be concerned with this setup, because again, like I said, tornadic wise, this isn't going to be a big thing. Yesterday was supposed to be more of that. The setup was a lot better, but of course it didn't perform. As a result, though, here's what we have going on here. Get storms to fire around 4 o'clock. It's kind of cutting it close for my time at work, unless it rains. But this is about 8 o'clock right here. See a little line of storms trying to develop here. We also see a line of storms developing over towards Virginia. Starts to ramp up as we get later into the evening here. Right at about 9 or 10 o'clock would probably be when we would expect the most severe weather. Outside of that, not really a whole lot going on here. We could watch for a little bit of increased activity over towards Columbia, maybe heading into the overnight hours. But I think by the time we get towards about 1 o'clock for these guys here, we may not have to worry about too much. Now, let's go look at our other slight risk area. And this is over towards the western high plains here. Watch the CAPE build, and we can see that we have decent numbers. We're at about maybe 500 to 1,000. 1,000 is the threshold point, basically, so it's possible, but we may not see a lot of coverage. As far as coverage is concerned, it looks relatively minimal to start out with. A couple of big storms late into the evening. We're just barely scratching the surface on slight risk criteria, if you were to ask me. But nonetheless, parameters seem to be in place just enough to where it would be concerning. I'm going to take a look at the low-level jet over here. And there's really not a lot to go off of. It's pretty limited, if I were to say so myself. Sometimes you can find something hidden in the mid levels, which would be at 700 millibars. Is about maybe close to 20,000 feet. And really, I'm still not seeing much of anything there. So it'll be interesting to see how things unfold. The timing of this is a little bit different too, because we're in a different time zone. When we look at Zulu time, that's usually about 6 to 7 hours off, depending on if we're in daylight time or standard time here. So I think it's about maybe 7 hours off for the Central Plains if we were going off of Central Time. So this model isn't quite able to look that far ahead. We only can look 18 hours on this. It's a great short range model, but it is limited on range. But that being said here, based off what I'm seeing right now, weather's going to be really interesting over towards the mid-Atlantic, over towards the Western Plains. Maybe later into the evening we can see some pretty big storms, maybe even after sunset here. But that being said here, that's all I got for you guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for everybody who liked, commented, subscribed, came into the stream last night and said hello. Hopefully I get to do this again later today. If not, we'll be covering the next big event, and more forecast videos are to come. But anyways, this has been Tyre, Metalhead Weatherman. I'll see you guys later today at some point. Till then, take care and have a nice day.